It's a lip-smacking encounter between Vidit Gujrathi, who is on your frame. He gets to the board, takes off his jacket. He's in a fighting mood today. He settles down and shakes hands with his opponent Nihal Sarin. Nihal is here, has a smile on his face. He seems to be in good spirits. It's the battle of generations, you can say. Two top tier Indian grandmasters facing up against each other. And the game begins. Nihal opens with 1 e4. Vidit responds with super solid knight f3, knight c6. Bishop goes to b5, the Ruy Lopez, and Berlin, the anti-Berlin, and bishop comes out to c5. Now Nihal has an option between taking here. He goes knight c3. Not the most common move. Generally, you want to keep your knight on d2, push the pawn to c3. That's how you play. But knight c3 is played quite a normal move. Castled by Vidit. And Nihal takes this opportunity to pin here with bishop to g5. h6 pushing it away. And now bishop h4. Now you see, when you play g5, there's knight g5 possible. So why don't we trade that with knight d4? Trading the knights here could be a very good idea. And if Vidit finds it, it could be very cool for him. Because knight d4, you can't really take knight e5. I have d6, very powerful move. And when you go back, I can pin you. So there are all these tricks, which is why Vidit is actually busy calculating his possibility here. And g5, of course, knight g5, you have to be slightly careful in this regard. And that's the reason why he's spending a lot of time, close to 40 seconds already. Wow, he's closing in on the 2-minute mark. But I can understand he's trying to make knight d4 work here. But when you're not aware of it, you are not sure. So he goes d6, which is the relatively safer option here. And now Nihal Sarin has to respond. What are his plans? Because now knight d4 becomes a serious threat. You could take the knight. Bishop takes c6. That is possible. And sometimes, as it happens in top level chess, the players kind of start mirroring each other. You know, one player takes time, the other player also decides to take time, and the entire flow of the game slows down. This is what is happening here. Nihal is taking his time, he's not moving. What is he intending to do? Well, he can play queen d2 with the idea of long castle. He goes, he does it. He plays queen d2. That's a good move. Also now g5 becomes even more unappetizing because the queen is looking on that square. It's a unusual position. You see, generally you don't have like these 4 knights standing here. Bishop comes out to e6. And Nihal now taking his time. Both the players are spending a lot of time in the opening trying to get to grips with what's happening. You can kind of long castle here, but then knight d4 followed by pushing the pawns on the queen side could be a problem. The other thing here that white could think of doing is knight to d5, putting the knight in the center of the board. But maybe the best option is to just chop off this knight on c6. Stop this knight d4 business from happening. Wow, look at Nihal's time. 1 minute, 17, 16, 15. He's ticking down. We've seen Nihal Sarin often coming down to like a few seconds on his clock. And he loves that adrenaline rush. He plays the best move. Bishop takes, pawn takes, and now plays his knight to e2, which is not the best move. The best option here would have been h3 castles, maybe later d4 in the air, but knight e2 played. And now Vidit can go rook b8. He goes king h7. His idea seems rook g8 and g5. He wants to get rid of this pin. It is irritating him somehow. But he has now built a solid 40 seconds lead on the clock. And it's increasing every second that Nihal Sarin thinks. And Nihal looking at the clock. He knows that he needs to speed up. But he's unable to find a very good plan. Maybe there is some d4 ideas. He goes h3, not a bad move. Maybe later g4, g5 is on his mind. He wants to open this up. Of course, here g5 would still be very risky because after take, queen g5, the queen enters, the knight is hanging, there could be a check after the knight moves. So all these problems. He goes rook g8 and now g4, threatening g5, opening things up. G5 played, bishop comes back. You can see how these two pawns are locked up against each other. The king on h7 feels a bit unsafe because h4 takes, the rook is standing right opposite it. And so Vidit says, let me get my king out from here. Let me place it in the center. But it's not a safe place for the king. Nihal gets his king to safety. Because d4 is going to come up. Can Vidit snatch this pawn? It's a possibility. But he goes rook b8. Pawn comes up to a3. Nihal saves the pawn. Also just improves his position here. And now Vidit's time is 52 seconds. He goes king f8. Trying to get his king out from the king side. Queen c3. Looking here, planning d4, placing the rook opposite the black queen. The queen comes up to e7. And now, maybe still d4. It just feels right. But there is this knight e4 business where you attack, then queen d3, and then white is doing really well. But it's so difficult. He goes rook h1, trying to protect the e4 pawn. Maybe then he will engineer the d4 move. But it's not so clear where the knight on e2 will move. And now Nihal has 20 seconds. Vidit has 30 seconds. We are on move 17. This is a bullet game. h5. Vidit is like, I'm too afraid of this d4 break. I'm going to open up the king side now. His own king is standing there. He takes the pawn here on h3. And now in the center, the break comes in. But this time, knight e4 is possible. And Vidit takes it. Knight takes e4. Attacking the queen. Attacking the bishop. At this point, white is slightly in trouble. Queen e3 now. ed4. Defending the knight seems to be right. Because right now your bishop is hanging. The knight is hanging. There are two options that you have. One is to take. Other is to take. He takes on g3. Knight g3. And the bishop drops back. Queen comes to c3. Attacking here. And the e-pawn. Well, you have to find this move, g4, which is not so easy to find. But he goes bishop g4, takes the pawn on e5. And now Vidit keeps it closed, but Nihal opens it up so quickly. e6 played. This is hanging, but he takes on e6, which is a mistake. Knight e5, jumping in. Because if bishop d1, you have knight c6 fork. Attacking here, but Nihal doesn't find it. He goes knight d4, which is also good. He's attacking c6 and e6. Queen comes to f7. And now knight takes pawn. He goes f3. Bishop takes knight. Rook takes. Bishop takes on h5. Queen comes in with a check. King moves up. He takes the pawn on e6. And now Vidit comes back with his bishop. And there is setting up a discovered check. Queen blocks. Pawn pushes forward. He takes the pawn and now rook takes e6 is a tactic. Nihal finds it. Wow. Look at the expression of Nihal. Queen takes e6 and now rook e4. It's a check and blocks it. Nihal unhappy but suddenly finds a move. Bishop f7 and finds a fork. Just from thinking that he was going to lose. Takes here and Nihal Sarin wins the game. What a victory this is for Nihal Sarin. We are now watching this in slow motion. Vidit plays his queen to f6 and look at Nihal's expression. He thinks he has lost it, but immediately while he's sad, he finds the winning move, rook e7, and look at his eyes there. They have lit up. He gives a check, and the moment that Vidit moves his bishop back, he is there with the fork, knight jumps in, and that is so incredible. Unbelievable. At the end, it was pure bullet and Nihal shows why he's the speed monster. But there was that one moment which we just saw where Nihal thought it was all over. And he was so sad at that point. But then he immediately spotted his opportunity and won the game. That's why he's called the Master Trickster.